The night Chicago turned into a sheet of frozen glass was the night everything in my life cracked open, though at that moment I thought it was just another miserable walk from the church basement to the old van where I slept. It was a little past 11, and the rain had hardened into tiny shards of ice that stung my cheeks and slid down the collar of my shirt. I wrapped my arms around myself and kept moving through the empty streets, the city lights smeared by the storm, until everything looked blurred and distant. My name is Marcus Hale, and at 48 years old, I had learned that silence is the soundtrack of a man who has lost almost everything. I passed a boarded store, then another, the wind howling through the alley like something wounded. My boots were soaked, and the cold had chewed its way into my bones, but being cold was nothing new. Living without warmth makes you forget what it ever felt like. I was only a block from the van when I saw her. At first, I thought someone had dropped a bag at the entrance of the train station, a dark shape hunched against the wall under the flickering platform light. Then the shape moved just slightly, and instinct pushed me forward before caution could pull me back. It was a woman. She was curled in on herself as if trying to disappear into her own body, her hair clinging to her face, her clothes soaked through until the fabric looked molded to her skin. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, and her lips had turned a pale shade that frightened me. She tried to lift her head, but it fell forward again. I knelt beside her and touched her shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her breath came out in faint, uneven puffs. She was freezing to death right there on the concrete. Without thinking, without giving myself even a second to consider the consequences, I pulled off my jacket, the only real barrier between me and the cold. It was thin and old, but it held a little warmth. I wrapped it around her and eased her upright. Her body sagged against my arm light, as if the life had been drained out of her. I whispered, "It is all right. Stay with me, please. Stay awake." The light above us flickered violently as the wind pushed another wave of ice down on the streets. That was when the door of the convenience store swung open behind me, and a group of young men spilled out loud laughing until they saw the scene in front of them. Everything changed at once. One of them shouted suddenly, "Hey, get away from her!" Another voice followed. "Is he trying to grab her?" Someone yelled to call the police. Their words hit me harder than the cold ever could. I lifted both hands so they could see them. "I am helping her. She fell. She is freezing." But my voice did not matter. I was a homeless man in soaked clothes leaning over a woman who could not defend herself. They saw what they wanted to see. A security guard from the store hurried toward us, his flashlight jerking wildly in his hand. He shoved me back with more force than necessary. "Step away, freak. Do not touch her again." The word freak sliced through me. I swallowed hard. I tried again. "Please, she is not breathing right. She needs help." Rain slapped against my face, and the cold burrowed deeper into my body now that I no longer had my coat. Still, the guard pushed me back as if I were something filthy he needed to get rid of. The woman slumped forward, her head nearly hitting the ground. The guard tried to support her, but she was limp in his arms. The shouting continued, and the lights of an approaching patrol car lit the street in harsh blue and red. My heart hammered in my chest. I had been judged before anyone knew my name. I stepped back slowly, hands still raised, water dripping from my fingers. One of the officers stepped out, eyes sharp, taking in the scene. The guard pointed at me. He was on her. I caught him touching her. Before the officer could reach me, the woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered. She fought for breath. Her voice came out like a piece of broken glass. "He helped me. Please, stop." Everything froze then. The officers stopped. The shouting dissolved. Even the guard stared at her with surprise. She looked at me, and for a moment the storm did not matter. Her expression was a strange mix of fear and gratitude and something else I could not name. The paramedics arrived and lifted her onto a stretcher. As they carried her toward the ambulance, she kept her eyes on me until the doors closed and the siren swallowed her face in red light. I stood alone on the sidewalk, soaked, shaking, ashamed, and somehow more invisible than ever. I had no idea who she was, or why that moment felt different from every other night I had walked these streets. I only knew that something had shifted like the first crack in a frozen lake, just before the whole surface gives way. I did not sleep that night. Even after the woman had been taken away in the ambulance and the cops finally stopped looking at me like I was one bad decision away from a prison cell, I walked back to my van with my shirt glued to my skin and the cold gnawing at every part of me. The heater in the van had died years ago, so I sat inside with my arms wrapped tight around my chest and tried to rub some warmth into my fingers, but the cold was not what kept me awake. It was her face, the way her eyes had opened just enough to defend me when no one else would. I had not had anyone speak up for me in a long time, not since before my life split apart at the seams. Nights like that have a way of dragging old memories out of hiding. I leaned against the cracked window of the van and stared at the frost creeping along the edges. My name is Marcus Hale, and before I ended up here, living out of a beat-up van in the back lot of an auto body shop, I used to build things people trusted. Homes, porches, staircases, all carved with steady hands and pride. I owned a small carpentry business, nothing big, just me and 2 helpers, but it was enough to pay the bills, enough to keep my wife Joanne smiling from the kitchen doorway as she packed my lunch every morning. Joanne. I can still hear her laugh if I let myself drift back far enough. She worked as a receptionist in a dental office, always brought home small stories about the patients who made her day. She was the soft place I landed after long hours sweating over lumber. She never let me forget that kindness mattered more than anything else in this hard world. She used to say when the world gets dark, someone has to keep a little light going. We thought we had time. We always think that until life shows us how wrong we are. One afternoon, Joanne collapsed at work. By the time I got the call, they were already rushing her to the hospital. A blood clot, they said. A sudden stroke. 43 years old, no warning. I spent 9 days sitting by her bed, holding a hand that grew colder every hour. Then one morning before sunrise, the machines went quiet. The silence in that room was louder than any thunderstorm I had ever heard. After she was gone, grief settled on me like wet cement. I still had my little girl Lily, who was not mine by blood, but by every other measure that mattered. Joanne's sister had struggled for years, and when Lily was 3, we took her in. She clung to me harder than anyone after Joanne passed. I tried to keep life normal for her. I woke her for school every morning, braided her hair, even though my big hands never could make the strands, even packed her lunch like Joanne used to do, and read her bedtime stories even when I was too tired to keep my eyes open. But grief is expensive. The hospital bills swallowed my savings whole. Clients canceled projects because I kept missing days due to paperwork meetings and trying to be present for a grieving little girl who deserved more than the half version of me that remained. The business folded. The mortgage payments fell behind. One morning, a man in a suit handed me papers and I had 60 days to move out. I tried every job I could find, from hauling debris at construction sites to washing dishes at diners where the manager barely looked at me. None of it paid enough. And then came the day the social worker showed up. She said Lily needed stability. She said I could reapply for guardianship when I was financially stable again. I remember signing the papers with a hand that would not stop shaking. I hugged Lily so tightly she sobbed into my shirt. Daddy will come back for you. I said it, but I do not know if she believed me. I do not know if I believed myself. After she left the house, felt like a hollow chest with no heartbeat inside. I spent my last weeks there patching the holes in the walls, fixing loose floorboards, as if repairing the wood could somehow repair the life collapsing around me. But when the day came, I packed what I could into the van and drove away because I had no choice. Cities do not treat the homeless well. Chicago is no different. People crossed the street when they saw me coming. Store clerks watched me like a hawk. At a supermarket once, a manager accused me of stealing even though I had not touched anything yet. I tried to laugh it off, but humiliation sticks to you longer than cold rain. There was a night I went to the library to use the heat and read job postings. I must have nodded off for 10 minutes. A guard kicked my boot and ordered me out, telling me I was not allowed to sleep inside. I apologized even though I had nowhere else to go. That is what homelessness does. It teaches you to apologize for existing. But I kept trying to be who Joanne believed I was. Someone who did not turn away from people. Someone who held on to decency even when his life was stripped bare. Maybe that is why I stopped for the woman at the station. I recognized that shivering loneliness, that fear. I had seen it in my own reflection too many times. I did not know her name then or who she was or why fate put her in my path that night. All I knew was that giving away my coat was the easiest decision I had made in years. It was everything I had left, and yet it felt like giving nothing compared to the ache inside me. I did not know that act would echo back to me. I did not know that helping her would be the first step toward piecing together the version of myself I thought was gone forever. If I had known, maybe I would have been less afraid. Or maybe more. I did not know what went through her mind that night, or in the hours after the ambulance doors closed, not until much later when she finally told me the pieces of the story that belonged to her. I only knew my side then standing in the cold rain, wondering if she would remember me at all once the world around her steadied. But in the days that followed, I learned what had happened on her side of that night, and it changed everything I thought I understood about her. Elena Ward was not the kind of woman anyone expected to find collapsed on a train platform. She was the chief operating officer of a large investment firm, someone who spent her days in glass towers, surrounded by people in tailored suits who moved fast and spoke even faster. She was known for her sharp mind and unshakable composure. No one, not even her colleagues, would have imagined she once knew what it felt like to be left out in the cold. What she hid from the world was that she did not grow up in privilege or comfort. She grew up in foster care, moving from home to home before she was old enough to spell her own name without sounding it out. She learned very young that people could walk away without looking back. When she was 9, an argument in a foster home spilled into the hallway, loud and terrifying. She ran outside, barefoot in pajamas, hiding behind a dumpster in the alley behind the building. It was winter then, too. She remembered curling up shivering so hard her bones hurt, crying silently because she knew no one would come for her. But someone did. A man she had never seen before carrying a grocery bag saw her and knelt down. He did not ask questions. He just took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You are safe," he said. "Just breathe." She never saw that man again. She remembered only the warmth of the jacket and the feeling of being seen for the first time in months. Her life eventually changed. She did well in school. She won scholarships. She clawed her way into rooms people like her were never expected to enter. She built her life one achievement at a time, never forgetting how cold that night behind the dumpster had been. But the more she succeeded, the more she buried the girl who had once cried in the alley. By the time she reached her 30s, that girl felt like a ghost she had worked hard to forget. The night I found her, everything she had buried cracked open. She had just left a tense meeting that ended with her absorbing the blame for a mistake she did not make, because that was what leaders did. She had been running on coffee and adrenaline for weeks, pushing herself through endless deadlines, sleep slipping through her fingers until her mind felt like it was pulling apart. Her doctor had warned her to slow down, but she brushed it off. She always brushed it off. Stress was normal. Exhaustion was expected. Breaking was not an option. But the human body does not care about job titles. When she stepped out of her car at the station, the cold hit her so hard she gasped. Her breath felt thin. Her hands shook. She convinced herself she could make it to the platform. She had taken 3 steps before her legs buckled and the ground came rushing up. She remembered hearing the hum of the train tracks. She remembered trying to breathe but feeling nothing but ice clawing at her chest. She remembered the panic rising inside her. And then she remembered warmth. A voice telling her she was okay. Arms lifting her. Something wrapping around her shoulders. She said later she thought she was dreaming, because kindness like that felt impossible in the world she lived in. When the light flickered overhead, she remembered a flash of movement behind me, but not the shouting. She drifted in and out as people argued above her. Her body felt heavy and distant. Everything was muffled as if she were underwater. Then one voice cut through the chaos, low and steady. It was mine. "I am helping her. She needs to stay warm." She said that something inside her recognized the tone, even if she could not understand the words. A tone that felt like safety in a world where she had not felt safe for months. She remembered trying to lift her head and failing. She remembered the cold slipping away, just a little replaced by the smell of worn cotton and something faintly familiar. She remembered wanting to hold on to the warmth but being too weak to move. And she remembered the moment the guard shoved me. She could not open her eyes, but she felt the sudden absence of warmth when he forced me away. That was when she fought to speak to make her voice break through the fear fogging her brain. He helped me. Please, stop. She said the words hurt coming out like dragging barbed wire through her throat, but she forced them anyway because she knew I was the only one who had touched her without taking something. When the paramedics loaded her into the ambulance, she drifted again, but not into panic this time. Into memory. Into the image of a stranger who gave her a jacket when she was 9. And then into the image of another stranger who had given her warmth again decades later on another freezing night. She told me later that as the ambulance pulled away, she had one clear thought before sleep claimed her. I know that feeling. I know that kindness. And it terrified her because she had spent her entire adult life trying not to need anyone. But that night in the cold, for the first time in years, she did not feel alone. And she remembered my face. She remembered the way I looked at her as if she were human, not a title or a problem to solve. She remembered my hands shaking from the cold, but still steady on her back. She would not admit it for a long time, but something inside her shifted the moment I put my jacket on her, something she could not put back the way it had been. Elena did not go home right away after they released her from the hospital. She told me later that she sat in the back of the car for nearly 10 minutes, staring at her reflection in the window as the city lights streaked past, trying to convince herself that what happened at the station was nothing more than exhaustion and cold mixing into a bad hallucination. She wanted to believe the kindness she felt had been imagined because believing otherwise meant acknowledging a need she had buried for years. Her driver kept glancing in the rearview mirror, asking if she needed anything, but she only nodded and stared out at the blur of passing storefronts and snow-covered sidewalks. When the car finally pulled up to her high-rise building, she stepped out into the heated lobby and felt the warmth hit her skin hard enough to make her eyes water. The doorman greeted her politely, but she barely heard him. She took the elevator up to the 27th floor and walked into her apartment that overlooked the river, a place filled with sleek furniture and soft lighting and not a single object that felt personal. She set her shoes by the door, then dropped onto the couch with a heaviness that made her sink into the cushions as if she were being swallowed. Only then did she remember the coat around her shoulders. My coat. She slid it off slowly, hesitantly, like it was something fragile. When she placed it in her lap, she noticed the fabric was slightly torn at one sleeve and the collar was frayed from years of wear. It smelled faintly of sawdust and cheap laundry soap, a scent she realized she had not encountered in years. Not unpleasant, just real, something she was not used to anymore. She ran her fingers across the inside lining, tracing the stitching, and that was when she felt something caught in the inner pocket. A small shape, something soft and folded. Curious, she reached in and pulled out a pair of tiny gloves, pink with edges worn almost smooth from use. Child-sized. The wool was thin, like something that had been washed too many times. Tucked inside the gloves was a piece of paper folded several times until it was nearly the size of a matchbox. She opened it carefully, the creases cracking as if they had been folded for years. It was a drawing made in bright crayons, the kind children usually use when they are trying so hard to make something perfect, even though the lines never stay straight. 2 stick figures stood under a yellow sun that was too big for the paper. One figure had large hands and a crooked smile. The other had a bow on her head. Underneath the 2 figures were 3 words written in a shaky, uneven script. I miss you. Lily. Elena inhaled sharply as if someone had punched her. Her chest tightened and the paper trembled between her fingers. She blinked once-twice, expecting the tears to stop before they started, but they did not. One slid down her cheek and fell onto the crayon lines, smudging the yellow sun just a little. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to silence the sob that rose unexpectedly from her chest. She had not cried in years. Her life did not allow it. Her job did not allow it. Her carefully built exterior did not allow it. But something about that drawing, about the little gloves tucked inside like a secret carried close to the heart, broke something open inside her. It dragged her back to memories she had locked behind mental steel doors. She remembered sitting in foster homes with other children who clung to drawings and toys because they were the only pieces of themselves they were allowed to keep. She remembered crying into the sleeve of a stranger's jacket when she was 9 because she had nothing else to hold on to. She remembered the coldness of nights when she felt small and invisible and afraid of being forgotten. She looked down at the drawing again and felt her throat close. This was not just a child missing her father. This was a child missing the only stable thing she had ever known. And the man who carried this drawing was the man who gave her his coat without hesitation. The man people called a freak. The man she had defended with the last of her strength. She touched the gloves again and noticed a stitched initial near the wrist. An L sewn with uneven thread. Homemade. Loved. Kept. She whispered the name written on the paper. Lily. She wondered where that child was. She wondered why a man carrying a drawing like that was alone on a freezing night. She wondered why he had so little yet still gave everything he had left to help her. As she sat there holding the drawing, she felt something she had not felt since childhood. Shame. Not for anything she did, but for everything she had forgotten. The girl who once cried behind a dumpster was gone, replaced by a woman who avoided vulnerability like a sickness. And yet a stranger who had less than she ever had showed her the same kind of kindness she had once needed. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, frustrated that they kept coming. She could not remember the last time she felt something this raw. She looked at the coat again, at the gloves, at the little drawing now warm from her hands. A realization settled over her like a slow, dawning light. This man was not a danger or a burden or a nobody. He was someone with a story heavy enough to carry worn-out gloves and a fading crayon drawing close to his heart. Someone with losses he did not speak of. Someone who knew how to give even when he had nothing left to offer but warmth. She leaned back against the couch, the drawing pressed to her chest, and whispered into the quiet apartment. "Who are you?" She did not know the answer yet, but she knew she needed to. She knew she would not sleep until she found him. And she knew that something in her life had shifted the moment she touched the small pair of gloves in her hands, as if fate had dropped a thread between two people who had once been strangers and now could no longer drift apart. Elena did not sleep that night. She lay awake on her couch with the tiny gloves beside her and the drawing resting on her chest, as if the weight of the paper alone could anchor her thoughts. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw my face again in the freezing rain, the way I held my hands up while people shouted at me, the way humiliation carved itself across my expression when the security guard pushed me back. She replayed her own faint voice breaking through the chaos the way I had looked at her just before the ambulance doors swung shut. She kept wondering why a man carrying a child's drawing was out there in the cold with no coat of his own. As the sky outside her windows darkened from deep blue to near black, she finally sat up and ran her hands through her hair. She did not know my name. She did not know where I had gone. She had only a jacket that smelled faintly of sawdust and winter air, a pair of gloves stitched with the letter L, and a memory of my face that lingered in her mind like a question she could not stop asking. By the time the sun rose, she knew she would not be able to pretend this did not matter. She dressed quickly, pulling on a sweater and long coat, and headed straight to her office, arriving before her assistant or any other employees. The building was quiet, the air still. She sat at her desk with the jacket folded neatly in front of her and opened her laptop. She began searching every news alert or incident report from the night before, hoping for some record of the confrontation at the station. She found nothing. The police report must have been minimal since no one was arrested. She checked the train station's lost and found notices, public posts, anything she could think of, but she found no mention of a man giving his coat to a stranger in the cold. When her assistant Rachel arrived, Elena hesitated only a second before calling her into the office. Rachel paused in the doorway, surprise flickering across her face when she noticed the jacket on the desk. "You are here early." Elena nodded. "I need your help with something. It is personal." Rachel straightened, sensing the unusual seriousness in her tone. "Of course. How can I help? I need to find someone. A man. I do not know his last name. I do not know where he lives. I do not know anything except that he saved my life last night." Rachel blinked. "Saved your life?" Elena exhaled a shaky breath. "I passed out at the station. He found me. He kept me warm until help came. And then he was treated like he was hurting me. I need to find him." Rachel stepped closer, studying her face. What do you know about him? Not much. But I know he had a child named Lily, or at least someone he cared for with that name. He kept a drawing of her in his pocket, and he had gloves, small ones, for a child. Something flickered in Rachel's expression, evidence of a life. Enough for her to understand this was not just about gratitude. Elena met her gaze. Can you look into camera footage near the Green Line station? Maybe the convenience store cameras. Ask the transit authority for clips. Anything from around 11 last night. Rachel nodded. I can do that. I will be discreet. Elena gave a small, grateful smile. Thank you. When Rachel left the office, Elena allowed herself to breathe again. She pulled the gloves from her coat pocket and held them gently as if afraid they might fall apart. Her own childhood memories pressed against her chest like cold hands. She understood too well how objects could hold whole pieces of someone's heart. The day stretched on slowly. Elena tried to focus on her work, but every spreadsheet blurred in front of her eyes. Every meeting felt hollow. Her mind kept circling back to the man in the rain, the quiet determination in his voice when he said he was helping her the way he had stepped back when the guard shoved him as if he was used to it. Hours later, Rachel returned with a tablet in her hands. I found something. Elena stood quickly, nearly knocking her chair back. What is it? Rachel pressed play. The footage showed the convenience store entrance. A few seconds later, I stepped into the frame, carrying my jacket cradled in my arms. Elena's breath caught. There. Then the camera caught her collapsing in the background near the platform. Me rushing toward her. The group of young men appearing. The shouting. The guard pushing me. The officers arriving. It was all there, grainy but clear enough. Rachel paused at a frame where my face was visible. Is this him? Elena nodded slowly, her throat tightening. Yes, that is him. Rachel swiped to another clip. This one from a street cam half a block away. It showed me walking away after the ambulance left soaked and shaking. She tracked the footage through several traffic lights until the blurry silhouette of my figure headed down a narrow street behind an industrial block. That is where he went, Rachel said softly. Elena pressed a hand to her chest. Then, show me what is there. That afternoon, Elena and her driver followed the trail of the footage to the back of an old auto body shop near the river. She stepped out into the cold wind and scanned the lot. Near the far fence sat a rusted van that looked like it had not moved in years. The curtains inside were drawn shut with a ragged blanket. The tires sagged. The paint peeled. But she recognized the faded blue color from the footage. She stared at it for a long moment, her heart pounding in a way she could not explain. This is where he sleeps. She whispered it as if saying it too loudly might break something delicate. Her driver opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. Elena took a slow breath, clutching my jacket tighter in her hands. She had found me. She knew where I was, and yet she stood there frozen, realizing this was only the beginning. Because finding someone was one thing. Knowing how to approach them when your worlds were so different was something else entirely. Elena did not knock on the van door that first afternoon. She stood in the cold for a long time, clutching my jacket to her chest, staring at the rusted metal shell that I called home. She imagined what might happen if she opened that door. Maybe I would be angry. Maybe I would be ashamed. Maybe I would not even remember her. 1,000 possibilities tangled together until she finally stepped back, pulled in a deep breath, and whispered to herself that she would return when she was ready. She did not know it, but I saw her that day. I had been inside the van, sorting through the small pile of job notices I had collected, and was sitting very still listening to the sound of footsteps outside in the gravel. When I peeked through a tear in the curtain, I saw a woman standing there with my jacket folded in her hands. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things. She did not come close enough to knock, and after a while, she left walking back across the lot, as if she were afraid of disturbing the air around the van. I did not understand why she was there, or how she had found me, but something twisted tight in my chest. No one looked for me anymore. The next morning, I woke early to work at a construction site on the edge of the city, the kind of day job that paid just enough for food, but not enough for anything more. The foreman did not know my name. Most of the crew did not either. To them, I was just the older guy who kept to himself and worked hard enough to avoid drawing attention. The cold was brutal that morning, but I had no jacket. I kept rubbing my arms as I hauled cinder blocks, ignoring the sting in my fingers, trying to focus only on the motion. In work like that, rhythm was everything. Move, lift, breathe, forget. But around mid-morning, while I was carrying a stack of materials across the lot, I noticed a black car park at the far side of the site. At first, I assumed it belonged to an inspector or a new manager. People like that came and went all the time. I kept my head down, concentrating on the work. That is when I heard someone call my name. Marcus. The sound hit me like a gust of wind. I froze. No one here knew my name. I turned slowly, and there she was, Elena, standing on the gravel in a long coat, her hair pulled back, her expression a mix of determination and something I could not place. She looked out of place, too clean, too polished for the dust and chaos of a construction site. But she did not look afraid of being there. She looked like she had come with purpose. The foreman noticed her and frowned, walking over immediately. "Mom, this is a restricted zone. You cannot just walk in." Elena did not look at him. She kept her eyes on me. "I am here to see him." The foreman turned to me with a raised eyebrow. "You know her." The embarrassment hit me instantly. I wiped dust from my hands on my jeans, feeling every stare around us. Workers had stopped what they were doing. A few were whispering. The idea that a woman like her had come to see me felt absurd even to me. I cleared my throat. "I do not know why you are here." Elena stepped forward, holding out my jacket. "You left this with me." I wanted to return it. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I had not expected to see her again, much less like this. "You did not have to come all this way," I said quietly. "I would have managed." The foreman sighed, irritation creeping into his voice. "If you need him for something, you can wait until he is off shift. I do not want him distracted." Elena turned her gaze on him, calm but firm. "I already spoke with site management. They said I could take him for a short while." The foreman hesitated, caught off guard. After a long second, he nodded reluctantly. "Fine. 15 minutes. As she walked toward me, I felt the weight of a dozen eyes watching. Men who had never paid attention to me before were suddenly staring as though they had uncovered a secret. My face burned with shame. I was covered in dust, wearing clothes that did not fit quite right. My hands cracked from cold and labor. Standing next to her felt like standing next to a mirror, showing everything I was not. Elena extended the jacket to me. I held it for a moment before taking it back. "Thank you for defending me that night." Her voice was softer now, almost hesitant. "You were the only one who helped me. I needed to." Those words hit me harder than the cold had. I looked away, unsure of what to say next. She studied me as if trying to understand the fractures inside me. "I wanted to ask you something, Marcus." I swallowed. My throat felt tight. "What is that?" "Will you come with me?" "Just for a moment. I want to talk." I shook my head. "I cannot leave. I have a shift." "Not anymore," she said quietly. I told them it was for an interview. My stomach dropped. An interview? For what? She did not answer. Not yet. Instead, she took a small step closer, her voice lower. "Please. You helped me when you had nothing. Let me return the gesture." I stood there frozen. My instincts screamed at me to say no, to back away before I embarrassed myself further. People like her did not show up in my life unless something bad followed, but her eyes were steady, sincere in a way that disarmed every defense I had built. After a long moment, I nodded once. She smiled just slightly, and something inside me shifted without my permission. As we walked across the site toward her car, workers watched openly. Some whispered. One laughed under his breath. Shame pressed on me like a weighted blanket, each step heavier than the last. I kept my eyes on the ground, but Elena slowed her pace until she walked right beside me. When we reached the car, she opened the passenger door as if expecting me to get in. I hesitated again. "I do not belong in that car," I muttered without lifting my eyes. For the first time, Elena's voice carried a note of steel. "You belong wherever human decency is respected. Get in, Marcus." I did. Elena drove us through the city in near silence, the hum of the engine filling the space between us while I kept my hands stiffly folded in my lap, trying not to touch anything that looked expensive. Every turn of the wheel made me more aware of the dirt under my nails, the dust on my clothes, and the faint smell of sweat clinging to me from working all morning without a jacket. I kept my eyes on the window, watching the skyscrapers rise higher as we moved closer to the financial district, a place I never thought I would see, from the inside of a luxury car. When she finally pulled up to a tall glass building with polished steel pillars and spotless entryways, my chest tightened. I shook my head immediately. I cannot go in there. Elena put the car in park. You can. You will. You are with me. Those were the same words she said the night at the construction site when the guard tried to throw me out. Even so, standing in front of a place like that made me feel like a stain on the sidewalk, something that had blown in from the cold. She walked ahead a few steps, then turned back when she realized I had not moved. Her eyes softened. Trust me. Reluctantly, I followed her inside. The lobby was enormous with marble floors that reflected the lights overhead and people in tailored suits hurrying past without looking at anyone. As soon as I stepped through the revolving door, the stares began. A woman at the reception desk tightened her smile, but her eyes flicked over my clothes with clear judgment. A security guard shifted from one foot to the other, watching me openly. I could feel the weight of every gaze like hands pressing down on me. Elena ignored it all. She led me to a private elevator and scanned her badge. The doors closed, sealing us off from the noise and tension. My pulse hammered in my neck. What is this about Elena? She met my eyes. Something important. I frowned. Why me? She did not answer until the elevator doors opened onto a quiet executive floor. We stepped into a boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. I stayed by the doorway, afraid to leave marks on anything. Elena moved to the table and laid out 2 cups of coffee she picked up along the way. I did not drink mine. I did not dare. Marcus, she said slowly last night, was not just a moment for me. It reminded me of something I had forgotten about humanity, about kindness. I shifted uneasily. I did not do anything special. You saved my life, she said firmly. And you did it without hesitation, without knowing who I was, without expecting anything in return. Most people do not do that. I opened my mouth to argue, but she lifted a hand to stop me. I want to offer you something. She reached into her bag, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the table toward me. I stared at it, but did not touch it. What is this? A job. My stomach dropped. A job! I said the word like it tasted wrong. She nodded. At my company, not charity. A role. Real work. My heart thudded painfully. You cannot be serious. I am. I laughed a hollow sound. I do not have a degree. I do not have anything. You have lived experience, she said. Perspective, integrity, things you cannot put on a resume. I shook my head. You do not even know me. You do not know what I have lost. You do not know what I have failed at. She stepped closer. Then tell me. Let me understand. Let me help. My jaw tightened. Help! That word stung worse than anything else. I do not need saving. Her expression flickered with hurt, but she spoke calmly. This is not about saving you, Marcus. This is about giving you a place to stand. A place where what you have lived through means something. I could feel heat rising under my skin, shame mixing with anger and fear until I could not tell one from the other. I glanced down at the folder again, seeing only the reflection of a man who did not belong in this tower. I cannot do this, I muttered. I do not fit here. Elena's voice softened. You fit anywhere humanity matters. That is why I want you here. My throat closed. I took 2 unsteady steps backward. No, thank you, but no. But I cannot take this. She moved after me. Marcus, please wait. I shook my head harder. I appreciate what you are trying to do, I really do, but you cannot build a job around a moment of pity. Her face changed from confusion to pain. Pity. That is what you think this is. I set my jaw. What else could it be? You do not know me. You just feel guilty because I helped you. She took in a sharp breath. That is not true. I was unraveling, drowning, and you were the only one who stopped. That matters. Not in the way you think, I whispered. Not enough to deserve this. I turned away from her, feeling the burn of humiliation, the ache of being offered something I could never hold on to. I walked toward the elevator, ignoring the way my vision blurred. When the doors opened, I stepped inside without looking back. Elena called my name, not loud, but with a note of disbelief, as if she had not expected me to run. The elevator doors slid shut on the sight of her reaching out, but unable to touch me. As I descended, my hands shook. The folder remained on the table upstairs unanswered. The offer hovered in the air like a bridge I refused to cross. Because I knew one thing. People like her did not stay in the lives of people like me, and I could not survive losing one more thing. Elena did not give up after I walked out of that building. I did not know it then, but she stood in that boardroom for several minutes after the elevator doors closed, staring at the space where I had been, her hand still half raised as if she could pull me back through force of will alone. What I saw as pity, she saw as purpose. What I interpreted as charity, she felt as responsibility. Not just because I helped her, but because something in the way I recoiled told her there were wounds beneath my skin that I had carried for too long. While I rode the train back toward the edge of the city, avoiding eye contact and sinking deeper into my jacket as if it could shield me from the humiliation pounding in my ears, she made a decision. If I would not step into her world, she would step into mine. The next afternoon, after an exhausting shift of loading lumber and sweeping debris, I returned to the van with my hands cracked from cold and my muscles trembling with fatigue. I opened the back door to find something unexpected sitting on the floor. A folded note. My name written on it in neat handwriting. I froze, gripping the edge of the van. No one left me notes. No one even knew my van existed except the shop owner who let me park there. I opened it slowly. Please meet me. 1 hour. I want to show you something. Elena. I stared at the paper for a long time, torn between disbelief and irritation, and something else I refused to name. I almost crumpled it, almost ignored it. But curiosity has a way of prying open even the most stubborn walls, and an hour later I found myself walking toward the address she wrote down. It was a part of the city I had not visited in years. The streets grew quieter, the buildings shorter until I reached a red brick structure with a faded sign that read Sunrise Children's Center. My feet slowed. I knew this place. I had done volunteer repairs here once years ago when my business still existed. I remembered fixing a rotted window frame and replacing a broken railing. I remembered children peeking from behind doorways, shy and hopeful all at once. I remembered thinking that even in the darkest parts of the city there were pockets of light. Elena stood outside the entrance waiting for me. She looked different in the late afternoon sun, softer somehow, as if the sharp corners she carried in her office melted in the warmth. When she saw me, she smiled gently, not triumphant, not smug, just grateful that I came. I approached, slowly, feeling out of place again, though, in a different way this time. This place did not judge me. This place felt familiar. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. I almost did not, I admitted. But you did. She stepped aside and gestured toward the entrance. Please, I want you to see something. I followed her inside. The smell of crayons and old books hit me immediately, mixed with the faint scent of bread from a kitchen down the hall. The walls were covered in colorful drawings, handprints, and encouraging quotes painted in bright letters. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. I felt something tug inside my chest. This was the kind of place Lily would have loved. Elena walked slowly, giving me time to take everything in. She paused at a doorway and looked back at me. Marcus, this place saved me once. I blinked. What do you mean? I grew up in the foster system, she said, her voice low. There were days I felt invisible, days I felt unwanted. But the first time I came here, I was 11, and it was the only place where I did not feel like an inconvenience. Her words hit harder than I expected. She turned toward the open playroom. Inside, a small group of kids was scattered across the floor building towers with foam blocks and giggling as they crashed them down. Volunteers moved gently among them, tying shoes, reading stories, offering quiet comfort where needed. Elena stepped into the room, and something inside her shifted visibly. Her shoulders relaxed, her eyes softened. A few children looked up and waved at her. She waved back. I watched her kneel beside a boy trying to build a tower taller than himself. She steadied a block for him and he beamed at her. When she stood again, she walked back toward me and exhaled shakily. This is who I was before the boardrooms, before the titles, before I forgot what it meant to be human. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the folded drawing I had carried for years. She held it gently as if it were something fragile. This, she whispered, reminded me of everything I lost, everything I buried. She swallowed hard. And when I saw your face the night you gave me your jacket, something inside me recognized that feeling, that sense of being alone and still choosing kindness. I wanted to look away. I wanted to hide from the intensity of her words, but she reached out and touched my arm lightly, grounding me in the present. I do not want to save you, Marcus. I just want you to stop carrying all of this alone. The simple sincerity in her voice cracked something inside me. I shook my head, overwhelmed. You do not know what I have been through. Then tell me, she whispered. Let me earn that part of you. A small girl around the same age Lily had been when she left the house walked up then, holding a stuffed animal missing one eye. She looked up at me with big, curious eyes. Are you new here? Her voice was so sweet it nearly crushed me. I crouched down to her level, swallowing the sudden tightness in my throat. Just visiting, sweetheart. She handed me the stuffed animal. He needs a friend. I felt my eyes burn. I handed it back gently, forcing a smile. He has one now. She giggled and ran back toward the play area. I stayed crouched a moment longer, fighting the wave rising inside me. When I finally stood, Elena was watching me with an understanding I did not expect. You carry so much hurt, she said quietly, but you still choose kindness. That is why I need you in that program, not for the company, for the people, for the ones who feel unseen. Her voice trembled slightly. People like me. Something inside me cracked open, then raw and vulnerable. I looked down, blinking hard, but the tears came anyway, silent, uncontrolled. Years of loss and shame and loneliness spilling over. Elena stepped closer, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel her presence steady the air around me. It is all right, she murmured. You do not have to be strong every second. I took a shuddering breath, wiped my face with the back of my hand, and nodded. Not for her, not for the job, but because for the first time in years, someone saw me not as a burden or a failure, but as a man who still mattered. I will do it, I said quietly. Tell me what you need me to do. I started the job the following Monday, though calling it a job felt strange at first. I had worked most of my life with my hands shaping wood, repairing homes, building things people could stand on or sleep under. This work was different. It required a different kind of strength, one I was not sure I had anymore. The Community Humanity Initiative was housed on a quieter floor of Elena's building, away from the constant noise of investment meetings and ringing phones. The space was warm, filled with mismatched chairs, plants in every corner, and handmade artwork from children in partner programs. It felt nothing like the polished boardroom where I had once stood feeling like an intruder. Even so, on my first day when I stepped into the office with a borrowed collared shirt and clean jeans Elena had insisted I take, I felt every insecurity clawing its way up my throat. People glanced at me from their workstations. Some smiled politely. Others looked confused. A few stared too long, their expressions tight cautious. I kept my head down, clutching the folder Elena had given me with my temporary ID badge. When she arrived 10 minutes later, she greeted me with a smile bright enough to cut through the tension. You are right on time, she said softly, as if speaking too loudly might scare me off. Let me show you around. She introduced me to the small team. Some shook my hand warmly. Others offered stiff nods. A young intern named Isaiah seemed especially uneasy, his eyes flicking over my worn boots before darting away. I tried not to take it personally. People judge what they cannot understand. Elena gave me a small desk in the corner near the window. The chair squeaked when I sat down. It felt like a gift anyway. A place of my own. Something I had not had in a very long time. That first week was quiet. I shadowed meetings, listened more than I spoke, and spent hours reading through the program manuals. But as the days passed, people began to approach me. First, it was a junior developer named Hannah who sat across from me one afternoon, her eyes rimmed red from crying. She apologized for interrupting me and then blurted out that she felt overwhelmed, burned out, like she could not catch her breath in the office anymore. I did not have advice prepared. I just listened. And when she finished, I told her something I had learned the hard way. You are not broken. You are tired. There is a difference. She stared at me, her expression shifting from confusion to relief, as if someone had finally given her permission to feel what she felt. The next day, someone taped that sentence on the break room fridge. By the end of the week, it was printed on sticky notes all over the floor. After that, more people came. A designer who felt invisible in team meetings. A manager second-guessing every decision. An intern who admitted quietly that he had been diagnosed with anxiety but was afraid telling anyone would cost him his job. I listened to every one of them. Their pain felt familiar. Their loneliness echoed pieces of my own. And slowly, something inside me began to rebuild. Not all at once, not with grand gestures, but with small, steady moments that reminded me I was still capable of helping people, still capable of being someone worth talking to, still capable of mattering. Elena checked in every day. Sometimes she asked how I was adjusting. Sometimes she asked if the work was too much. Sometimes she just sat beside me in the break room sipping coffee in quiet companionship. One afternoon, she found me sanding a splintered wooden stool in the corner of the office. It had wobbled badly, and I could not stand watching people nearly fall every time they sat on it. She leaned against the wall and watched me work, her eyes warm. You seem more like yourself when you are fixing things, she said. I shrugged, focusing on the smoothing motion. I guess I do not know how to stop. She smiled. Then do not. Build here too, not just with wood, with people. She saw more in me than I saw in myself. Some days I resented that. Most days I was grateful. By the end of the second month, Elena recommended I take on a more permanent role. She submitted paperwork for a long-term contract, though she discussed it with me first. You deserve a stable foundation, she said softly. Let us help you build one. I hesitated. Accepting meant committing. Committing meant believing I had a future. That was harder than it sounded, but I said yes. In the evenings, I started visiting Sunrise Children's Center on my own, repairing broken shelves, tightening bolts on bunk beds, replacing old hinges. The kids remembered me quickly. They asked me questions I had no business answering. Why do you look sad sometimes? Did you have a daughter? Were you ever scared when you were little? Their honesty cut through me in ways adults never could. One night, a boy around 12 stayed behind after the others left the common room. He hovered near the doorway, hands jammed into his pockets. Do you really listen to people at your job? He asked cautiously. Not judge them. I nodded. He swallowed hard. I think I might need that someday. Something moved inside me, warm and painful all at once. Anytime you want, I said gently. The boy nodded once, then left without another word. That night, sitting alone in the van, I stared at the new work schedule Elena had given me and felt something I had not felt in years. Hope. Not loud or triumphant, soft, steady, like a small fire finally catching after months of blowing on damp kindling. I still lived in the van at that point. I still struggled with paperwork and money and the weight of everything I had lost. But for the first time since Joanne's death, I felt forward movement. I felt the ground beneath my feet shift in a way that suggested a path might exist. And through it all, Elena was there. Not constantly, not intrusively, but consistently. Walking beside me, not trying to save me, not trying to fix me, just existing in a way that made rebuilding feel possible. The arc of my life was rising again, slowly, carefully. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself rise with it. Elena called it Humanity Day, though no one else in the company understood what that meant at first. When the invitation emails went out and the atrium began filling with rented lights and white drapes and rows of chairs, people whispered about whether it was a new diversity initiative or a press event or some kind of investor showcase. No one expected what it would become. I certainly did not. I only knew Elena had asked me to be there on time and to wear the clean suit she had quietly arranged for me through a friend who owned a small tailoring shop. I had resisted at first, insisting I did not need a suit, but she looked me in the eye and said, "You deserve to be seen the right way." That simple sentence dismantled every argument I had. So I stood in the restroom mirror that morning, staring at a man I barely recognized. The face, lined with grief and time, was still mine, but the sharpness in my eyes, the steadiness in my shoulders that felt new. As I walked through the lobby, people glanced at me, some for the first time, without confusion or suspicion. A few employees even smiled. When I stepped into the atrium, I froze. The massive banners that usually displayed quarterly profits and product milestones were gone. In their place were strings of warm lights, a soft stage, and a tall display draped in white cloth. The whole room had been transformed into something that looked like a place meant to celebrate people, not numbers. Hundreds of employees filled the seats. Conversations echoed through the air until Elena stepped onto the stage. The moment she appeared, the room quieted. She wore a simple black dress, her hair tied back, no jewelry, no polish beyond what she always carried in her posture. Yet something about her presence commanded the kind of silence people usually give to someone they trust. "Thank you all for being here," she began. Her voice was calm, but carried through the room cleanly. "Today is not about profits or metrics or projections. Today is about moments." The room shifted with curiosity. Elena continued, "A moment can change a life. Sometimes it is small enough to miss unless you are paying attention. Sometimes it lives in the hands of someone you might overlook." Her eyes drifted briefly toward me, then back to the audience. "A year ago, I was standing alone at a train station in the freezing cold. I fainted, and when I woke, I was surrounded by fear, confusion, and accusations. Except for one person. One man who gave me his only jacket in the middle of an ice storm. He did not know who I was. He had nothing to gain. But he chose kindness anyway." A soft murmur spread through the atrium. I swallowed hard, heat rising behind my eyes. Elena gestured toward the draped display. "Today, I want to show you something." She pulled the cloth away. Underneath, framed in glass beneath warm lighting, was my jacket. The old, faded, threadbare coat I had worn through storms and sleepless nights. The same coat I had wrapped around her shoulders on the night everything changed. Beneath it was a small plaque engraved with the words, "One act of warmth can change a lifetime." A hush fell over the room. Elena turned back to the audience. "That night, he reminded me of who I used to be. He reminded me of the man who once saved me as a child. He reminded me what it means to lead with humanity instead of fear." Her voice wavered just slightly, and no one looked away. Then she said my name. "Marcus, would you join me?" A ripple went through the room. For a second, my legs would not move. I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me, but for once, I did not feel small. I stood, walked toward the stage slowly, the suit stiff on my shoulders, but the ground steady under my feet. When I stepped up beside her, applause rose like a wave. Not polite applause, not corporate applause, real applause. Loud enough to shake something loose inside me. Elena smiled softly at me, then addressed the crowd again. "Marcus has taught us more about leadership in the past months than any seminar or retreat ever could. He taught us to listen, to see one another, to offer space instead of solutions, to protect softness in a world that tries to harden us." People nodded, many visibly emotional. The young intern Isaiah wiped at his eyes. Hannah from the design team smiled at me through tears. Elena stepped closer, not touching me, but standing with me in a way that made it clear she had never intended to stand alone at the front of that room. "Marcus changed me, and he changed this company." She took a breath. "It is my honor to recognize his work today, but more importantly, to acknowledge the person he is, the person he always was even before we met him." Then she turned to me. "Marcus, thank you for reminding us what humanity looks like when everything else is stripped away." The applause returned louder this time. I tried to speak, but no words came. My throat locked. My eyes burned. I had spent years being unseen, unheard, dismissed, judged, discarded, and now here I was standing on a stage while hundreds of people recognized me for something I never thought mattered. Slowly, I lifted the microphone she offered. My voice came out rough, fragile. "I do not know what to say." A few people laughed softly, encouragingly. I swallowed. "I was not always who you see now. I lost a lot, more than I can put into words. But when someone gives you a chance to stand again, You take it, and you try your best not to waste it. I looked at the jacket behind glass. That coat got me through some of the hardest nights of my life, but the night I gave it away was the first time I felt like myself again. A moment of silence wrapped the room like warmth. I lowered the microphone and stepped back. Elena stepped forward again, her voice carrying through the room one last time. Let us live by the lesson Marcus gave us. Kindness first. Always. The applause rose again and did not stop. Not for a long time. And as I stood there, surrounded by light and sound and people who finally saw me, I felt something I once believed was gone forever. Worth. After Humanity Day ended, after the applause faded, and people finally returned to their desks, buzzing with a kind of energy I had never seen in an office, before I slipped out of the atrium and found a quiet corner near the emergency exit, my hands were still trembling. Not from fear this time, but from something close to disbelief. I had never been honored in front of anyone before, much less hundreds of people who once looked through me. I leaned against the wall, breathing slowly, feeling the weight and warmth of everything Elena had said. But even that moment of recognition could not erase the reality waiting for me every night. The van, the cold, the uncertainty. I was trying to build a new life, yes, but I was still living on the edge of collapse. And then came the twist that changed everything. A few days after the event, Elena knocked on my small office door with a folder in her hands. Not a job folder this time. Something else. When she sat across from me, her expression was careful, as if she was holding something too important to drop. Marcus, I want to talk to you about your daughter. My heart stopped. Lily. I had spoken about her only once in that room at Sunrise Center, my voice breaking as I tried to explain the day she was taken. I had not expected Elena to remember every detail. I never expected her to act on it. What about her? I whispered, bracing myself for bad news. Elena opened the folder. Inside were documents, legal forms, case updates, copies of letters I had mailed months ago but never received replies to. I blinked hard. How did you get these? I requested them, she said gently. Through the proper channels. I wanted to understand your situation. I did not answer. My throat felt too tight to speak. Elena continued. You have been working steadily for months. You have rebuilt consistency. You have no criminal record. Your evaluations from the team are excellent. Her voice softened. You are ready to ask for reunification. The word ready broke something inside me. For so long, I had believed that window had closed, that I had lost her forever. I sank into my chair, gripping the edge of the desk because the ground felt suddenly unstable. Elena placed her hand gently on the folder. I want to help you file the petition. But before we can do that, you need one thing. Stability. A permanent address, employment proof, health clearance. I nodded slowly. I know. That is why... Her expression softened even more. That is why I put together a housing plan for you. Not a house given. Not a gift. A plan. One you qualify for. One that is yours. She slid another stack of papers forward. Housing assistance programs, low-income mortgage options, a small stipend from the company tied to your contract, and most of all, a financial counselor who is already willing to meet with you. Everything in my chest constricted. I half rose from my chair. Elena, I cannot accept this. You have done too much. This is not pity, she said firmly. This is structure. This is access. This is helping you fill out the forms you have earned the right to fill. I sat back down hard. My hands shook so much she reached across the desk and steadied them with hers. I want you to have your daughter back. And you will. But not because of me. Because you built your life again piece by piece. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. When do we start? I whispered. Today, she replied. The next weeks moved like a storm and a slow rebuild at the same time. Home visits, interviews, psychological evaluations, background checks. Every step felt like walking through a corridor lined with memories, fears, hope, and dread all colliding at once. Elena was there for every appointment. Sometimes she waited in the car. Sometimes she waited outside the office. She never interfered. She never spoke for me. She simply showed up steady and unshakable the way no one had shown up for me in years. The CPS social worker assigned to my case was a middle-aged woman named Dana, who had a calm voice and eyes that saw too much. She invited me into her office and motioned for me to sit. "Marcus, I have reviewed your file many times. I know what you have been through. I know what you lost, and I know how hard you have worked to rebuild." I nodded slowly, grinding my palms against my knees to keep them from shaking. But she continued, "This process is not about what you survived. It is about what you can provide now." She asked me questions, hard ones. "Can you offer a stable home?" "Yes." "Do you understand the emotional needs of a child who has experienced separation?" "Yes." "Who is your support system?" I hesitated, then whispered, "I have one now." When she closed her folder, she gave me a long look. "You are not the same man who lost everything, and I believe your daughter deserves the chance to know the man you have become." When I stepped out into the hallway afterward, Elena was leaning against the wall, arms crossed loosely as if she had been waiting there for hours. "How did it go?" she asked. I could not answer for a moment. Then I whispered, "I think I might get her back." Emotion cracked my voice. Elena stepped closer, not touching me, but offering her presence, the solid kind that kept my knees from giving out. Weeks later, on a crisp morning at the CPS office, I sat in a small room with drawings on the walls and toys in the corner. My heart felt like it was vibrating. The door opened. A small girl with dark curly hair and eyes that looked exactly like the ones I had memorized walked in slowly, almost shyly. Lily. Her name broke in my chest like sunlight through clouds. She froze when she saw me. Her lip trembled. "Daddy!" I stood before I could think. My legs moved on instinct. She ran to me, and I dropped to my knees just in time for her to crash into my arms. Her tiny hands wrapped around my neck and her face buried into my shoulder. I held her as tightly as I dared, my tears falling into her hair. "I am here," I whispered again and again. "I am here. I am here." I kept my promise. People in the room wiped their eyes. The social worker turned away, pretending to look for paperwork. I did not let go for a long time. And when I finally looked up, Elena was standing in the doorway, watching, smiling. Her eyes shimmering with tears she did not bother to hide. I mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." She shook her head slowly. "No. You did this." For the first time in years, I believed her. What happened after Lily returned to my life did not unfold like the endings you see in movies. There were no fireworks and no dramatic confessions, no sudden promises sealed in the rush of emotion. Real life is quieter, slower, more fragile. But it is also deeper in ways I never understood until that year. After the reunification, CPS required follow-up visits, parenting evaluations, and stability checks. I welcomed all of it. My small one-bedroom row house in a quiet corner of the city slowly transformed from a place to sleep into a home again. I painted the walls a warm shade of blue because Lily said blue felt safe. I built her a small wooden bookshelf because she loved stories. I let her choose where her bed would go, and she chose the corner with the window so she could watch the moon at night. Every day felt like relearning how to be a father. She had grown. She had habits and quirks I did not know yet. She needed reassurance, patience, gentle consistency. Some days she clung to me so tightly it hurt. Other days she stayed quiet and studied me as if making sure this was real. Sometimes she woke from nightmares and crawled into my bed without a word. I wrapped my arms around her and waited until her breathing slowed. Every new piece of her felt like something I had been given back, and every day Elena showed up in small ways. Not hovering, not intruding, just present. She stopped by the house once a week with groceries she insisted were simply extra from her meal prep. She helped me navigate school paperwork and pediatrician appointments. She taught me how to organize Lily's schedule with work hours so I would not lose track of anything. One Saturday, she arrived with paint on her hands because she had spent the morning helping a classroom repaint their reading corner. Lily adored her instantly, but Elena never tried to replace anything. She never stepped into the role of mother or savior. She simply existed in our lives with an ease that felt natural, like she had always belonged somewhere near our orbit without ever trying to pull us into hers. I kept reminding myself not to mistake kindness for something more. I kept reminding myself that people like her lived in worlds brighter and cleaner than mine. But every time she smiled at Lily, or stayed late at Sunrise Center, repairing a toy shelf with me, or handed me a thermos of coffee, without comment, on a day I looked exhausted, something inside me shifted a little more. Slowly, carefully, like thawing ice. Months after the reunion, Elena invited us both to a charity event at Sunrise Center, the same place where she had first told me the truth about her childhood. The center had been decorated with strings of lights and paper lanterns the children had made. Music drifted through the hall while volunteers served soup and sandwiches to families who had nowhere else to go for warmth that night. I watched Elena move through the room, kneeling to talk to children, laughing softly with volunteers pushing stray hair behind her ear as she carried boxes of donated clothes. She looked nothing like the executive in heels and sleek suits who had changed the course of my life. She looked human, real, and maybe a little fragile beneath that strength she wore like armor. I realized then that she had given me more than job security. She had given me a path back to myself, a path back to Lily, a path toward believing in kindness again. When the event wound down and volunteers began cleaning up, I found her standing beneath the mural near the entrance, wiping paint from her hands. The golden light from the lanterns reflected in her eyes. "You two looked happy tonight," she said softly. "Lily loves this place," I replied. "And she loves you." Elena looked down, almost shy. "I love her too." That simple truth landed in my chest with a warm, steady thud. After a moment, she added, "You have changed a lot this year, Marcus." I nodded. "So have you." She smiled at that. A real smile, small but unguarded. Then she glanced around the quieting room. "Walk with me." We stepped outside into the cool night air. The courtyard was empty except for the soft glow of the overhead lights and the faint hum of traffic in the distance. We walked slowly, our footsteps echoing on the pavement. Not speaking, not needing to. When we reached the far edge of the courtyard, she stopped and turned toward me. "I want to tell you something," she said, her voice steady but her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her sleeve. I waited. "That night you gave me your coat changed everything in my life. Not because of what you did, because of who you were, who you are. Someone who still believes in goodness even after losing everything. Someone who holds on to hope even when the world tries to take it from you." I swallowed hard. "Elena." She looked up at me with eyes that had learned how to survive storms I never saw. "I spent years thinking I had to be made of steel to matter. You showed me I could be human instead." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The breeze moved her hair across her cheek. Without thinking, I reached out and gently brushed it away. My hand lingered for half a second. She leaned into the touch without fear, but she did not step closer, and I did not pull her in. Some things need time. Some things deserve to grow slowly the way trust does, the way healing does. She took a breath. "I want you in my life. Not because I owe you anything, not because you saved me, but because I choose you." Her words cracked something open inside me in the gentlest way possible. I stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath in the cool night air. "I choose you too," I said quietly. We stood there beneath the string lights, the night humming softly around us, the world no longer divided by the differences that once held us apart. She did not kiss me. I did not reach for more than what the moment offered. Instead, she slid her hand into mine fingers, lacing slowly, carefully, as if asking a question without speaking it. I answered by holding on. A year after I gave my jacket to a stranger at a freezing train station, I had my daughter sleeping safely in her room. I had a home whose walls no longer echoed with emptiness. I had work that gave me purpose again, and I had a woman beside me who saw me not as someone broken, but someone worth walking toward. I looked at her in the soft glow of the courtyard lights and realized something simple and extraordinary. I had given away my only coat, and somehow in return, life had given me everything I thought I had lost. If this story touched something in you, even just a small corner of your heart, then take a moment to sit with it before the world pulls you back into its noise. Because stories like this are not just tales we listen to, they are mirrors, reminders of who we once were, who we could become again, and the quiet truth that kindness still matters even when the world tries to convince us otherwise. Maybe you have known a moment where someone reached out a hand when you least expected it, or maybe you were the one who offered warmth to another soul in the cold. Whatever the case, the world remembers those small gestures even when people forget, and sometimes those gestures ripple much farther than we ever see. If you have ever felt invisible, overlooked, or pushed aside by life, then know this story was for you because Marcus's journey is not fiction. For many people walking around us every day, carrying silent battles behind tired eyes, hoping someone will simply notice. And if Elena's transformation made you pause, it is because deep down, we all understand that strength is not built by walls, but by the courage to take them down to allow compassion to soften what hardship hardened. So before you go, ask yourself one thing: when was the last time you chose to be the reason someone believes there is still good left in the world? If this question makes your heart ache a little, that is not sadness, that is recognition. And if stories like this remind you of the beauty hidden in ordinary moments, then consider joining this community by liking, sharing, or subscribing. Not because algorithms want you to, but because maybe someone out there needs this reminder tonight more than you know. Maybe there is a person scrolling alone in their room, drowning in bills, grief, loneliness, heartbreak, or exhaustion, needing to hear that life can still turn, that kindness can still find them, that second chances are not fairy tales but real, breathing possibilities. Your one share might be the thing that reaches them. And if you have a story of your own, one you have carried for years in silence, one that hurt you, shaped you, strengthened you, or saved you, I invite you to share it in the comments, not for attention, but for connection, because healing grows faster when someone else says, "I've been there too." This channel is not just a place to listen. It is a place to breathe, to reflect, to remember that compassion is still louder than cruelty, and that hope never dies as long as people keep choosing it. So, stay a little longer. Walk with us through more stories. Let your heart settle and rise again with each one. And if this story made you believe even 1% more in the power of simple kindness, then carry that belief with you when you step back into your day, because you never know whose life you might be rewriting without even realizing it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for feeling. And thank you for being part of a corner of the internet that still believes in humanity. Until the next story, stay kind, stay open, and never stop believing that even the smallest warmth can change a lifetime.